and welcome back to another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, shoveling snow, changing dirty diapers, or maybe you finally got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast, during one of those night feedings. If that's you, well, welcome to the podcast. If that's not you, well, still welcome to the podcast, whatever you're doing, wherever you're at. Thank you for listening and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Jay, and today I have a truly exceptional guest with me today. I have Dr. Brian Lucien. I didn't ask how to pronounce your last name.
It's Laquanin.
Laquanin. I was
Yeah.
so close. We're going to go with Dr. Brian. We're going to go with Dr. Brian
That's good for
all legal purposes here. Dr. Brian is a California board-certified psychologist with nearly 20 years of experience working with demographically diverse populations. He's not only a seasoned clinician, but also a speaker, educator, and author who is passionate about spreading awareness on mental health and substance addiction. As you know, if you listen to this podcast for any duration of time, these are two issues that are very near and dear and close to me personally. Dr. Brian holds a PhD in counseling psychology and an MS in industrial organizational psychology from the University of Oklahoma, as well as an MA in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University. His extensive training includes specializations in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and he has also substantial experience in family crisis intervention. He's worked in various clinical settings, treating a wide range of psychiatric conditions such as mood disorders, anxiety, trauma, psychotic disorders, and substance use disorders. Dr. Brian is also the author of an award-winning book, How to Get Your Loved One into Treatment and Safely Back on the Road to Recovery, which has received critical acclamation for its practical guidance on helping those resistant to seeking help. In his personal life, Dr. Brian believes in maintaining a sound mind, body, and spirit. We love that here at the Young Dad Podcast, mind, body, spirit balance. He practices mindfulness, strength, and weight training, and competes in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which don't mess with him, truly embodying the practice what I preach philosophy. Today, we're going to dive into important topics such as mental health awareness, substance addiction, and myths surrounding suicide. And how to take necessary actions to get loved ones the help that they need. So, without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Brian to the show. Brian, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, Jay. Nice to be here.
Of course, I'm super excited to have you. I love talking to other mental health professionals with a little bit of different walk than me, especially doctorate level that have so much vast experience. Because I'm only little on me. I only have my master's in developmental psychology, so I only practice at that level. But I love talking to people who are smarter than me, that have more specialized niches than me, and someone I can learn from, as well as our listeners can learn from today too. So very excited to have you. If you see me taking many, many drinks, it's because I've had a sore throat for like 4 days now. It still feels a little bit raspy and a little bit hard. So listeners, if you're watching to this on Rumble or YouTube or Spotify video, forgive me. It happens. But Dr. Brian, we're going to start off with a big question today. I'd like to start off with a big question because big questions are good. What a hill you're willing to die on when it comes to mental health and or helping loved ones who are resistant to treatment?
What was that first part? What is that first part?
What's a hill you're willing to die on? So like something that you're so passionate about, like nothing will change your mind. Someone can even hold a gun to your head and tell you need to change your position on this, and you would take that bullet versus changing your position. When it comes to mental health and or helping loved ones who are resistant to treatment.
Okay. So I thought you said, and so I just wanted to clarify that. And so,
of course.
The first thing that comes to mind for me, and it's actually the tone and the premise of my whole book and my first must-know knowledge that I put right about with 25 of them. And it's the first one, and it's to have hope. That is something, if I was on a hill, I would die for, is because, number one, just in the human condition alone, hope gives us some level of optimism, something to look forward to, and it prevents us from staying stagnant in life, and it comes up with solutions, and especially for people who are struggling out there on various capacities. A lot of times people who I work with are in some level of desperation. They feel and believe that they've tried everything, there's no hope for them. And these are people who have had very, very traumatic upbringings, very toxic relationships, maybe traumatic events that have happened to them on various levels of abuse. Maybe they've had chronic substance use issues, and they truly believe that is not something they can get out of. And I know that in my work with hundreds, if not thousands of people on various capacity, whether it be in a residential treatment, whether it be in a group, whether it be in support groups or talks, many of those people were in dire situations that they, for example, you talk about suicidality. You know, I've had people who wanted to die an hour, a day or two before coming into getting help, and they're able to thrive and change their perspective on life and have a life of fulfillment, of self-worth, and reestablishing relationships. So that would be the biggest thing that I would tell people out there, no matter how desperate you feel, how disconnected you feel, and how hopeless that you may feel, that there are solutions and that there is hope that you can get better to make a change.
Wow. Okay, got me all choked up over here. But no, the hope part is so important, right? I feel like everyone that walked in for any kind of mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment, there's very little hope, right? Especially if they're going to an inpatient treatment and going to get that help. You know, they're hoping. You know, they're on their last little bit, and last little strand of hope. Like I'm 99% no hope and 1% hope. But that's all it takes. You know, it only takes that 1% of hope. As long as you can have 1% of hope that you can get better, that you can stabilize, that you can sober up, that you can work the treatment program, that you can work through the counseling and whatnot, then that's all it really takes. Um, and then that hope, you know, slowly turns into 2%, then it turns into 4, and then it turns into 8, and then it slowly starts to grow. The more and more that you stay with it, the more and more that you practice those things, the more and more that you continue the treatment, continue counseling and whatnot, it grows. So I think that's something super important to focus on there. Hope. You gotta have hope. If you don't have hope, then what's the point? Because hope is what's going to keep you going. Hope's what's going to keep you involved. Hope's what's going to keep you showing up every week for counseling and for meetings and things like that. Hoping that there's something that increases that hope a little bit more to where it becomes easier.
Think as well,
Of course.
absolutely. And what I want to add, and maybe it'll come up later in our conversation, is that because there might be people out there like, yeah, I've been hopeful for so long time and nothing comes into my way. One thing I want to add to that is there has to be some level of what I call humility. Humility is this to take down our barriers and take down any pride that we have and recognize what I've been doing hasn't been working. Because we can be hopeful all we want. Is that I'm hopeful that I'm going to be able to get sober. I'm hopeful that I'll get through things. However, they're doing the same thing over and over again. And we have to be humble enough to be honest with ourselves that what I've been doing hasn't been working and I have to change something. I have to change, and whether it be I have to connect with new people, I have to establish a fellowship of healthiness around my life. I need to educate myself. And so, in addition to just hope, because hope in and of itself alone is huge, but it's not the only attribute or ingredient to get you there. It is the first step, just like willpower. I talk about it. It's one of my must know knowledges, is because some people believe that all it takes is just willpower. I believe, if I was to give my own percentage, I think willpower of getting healthier, making a change, or getting sober is just about 15% of it all. Because you have to have some level of willpower to want to make a change. But everything else, like I said before, all those attributes of seeking help, education, fellowship, community, working on mind, body, spirit are attributes that supplement willpower and hope.
Exactly. And it really reminds me of the scripture, James 2:26. For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. Is that hope is your faith, right? But without that action behind it, my grandma always used to say this. My grandma, to this day, she will still say this, to where uh, one of her favorite sayings is, God helps those who help themselves. And so we have to be willing to help ourselves. And that humility, is something very important because that humility is what keeps us resistant to seeking help, right? To seeking changes, to seeking treatment, for mental health or for substance abuse issues. So, in addition to not having the humility here, what are some of those other common reasons that people may resist treatment? And how can families and loved ones effectively help intervene without causing more harm? Because I feel like a lot of family members will see their loved one who's struggling with addiction and maybe having a hard time overcoming, and they're like, well, I don't want to force myself into the situation because I don't want to make it worse. But that's a very easy, and yes, I'm going to call them out here, that's a very easy caveat to say, well, I just don't want to get mixed up in that because I don't got time for that, and so I'm just going to use that as kind of an excuse, kind of, instead of involving myself in the weeds, because that person may really need you specifically. And that if that's on your heart to go and do and to go and help, your loved one with that, then that's for a reason. Because maybe you're that one voice they'll listen to. But in addition to, that humility and some of those excuses, what are some of the other common like reasons people resist treatment? And again, like I
Great,
asked you, how can families help effectively intervene?
great point, Jay, that you bring up, and one of it is focused a lot on the family dynamics, and it's not so much. It could be, I guess, on some level, but what I find in terms of what you were mentioning, that people use it as a caveat or an excuse. I believe on some cases that may be the case. On the
Yeah,
most level, what I would say with a lot of the family dynamics I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of dysfunctional, counterproductive, toxic relationships and families, is that a lot of it boils down to fear. Fear of, can I help the person, or I've tried, is this person, if I put all this effort into it, we're just going to be back into square one. And one of the things that I give, I talked a little bit about my own percentages, and what I always say is these are just my percentages. It's not something you can look on the internet, and it's a hard, fast statistic. One thing that I do say with the various family dynamics I've worked with on a treatment level, these are people who come in for a 45, 60, 90-day plus treatment, and the families are still involved, is that those families were coming from a good place. And I talk about that just because you come from a good place doesn't mean it's always the right or the healthiest place. If I have people who that's what how they grew up, that's what they just believed in, that they thought they were coming truly from the right place, and because fear and guilt are the two, and shame are the three of the biggest barriers that I've ever seen of why people are resistant to get help, or family members are hesitant to render any type of help. Fear is a legitimate emotion, right? That's part of our human condition. We wouldn't have it if it wasn't part of our human condition. But of course, high degrees of fear become paralyzing and cause us to not take action. But being fearful, I believe, is a legitimate emotion that has some protective factors to it, right? We have
mhm,
fear about going into a hike without preparing appropriately. That level of anxiety and fear can have some survival mechanisms to it. And so, but fear, and then definitely shame is definitely also one of them. Shame is this sense of humiliation, and sometimes family members thinking they're coming from a good place, like, hey, don't talk about emotions, be tougher than that. And it creates this level of embarrassment and humiliation about talking and being transparent about what's going on with them. Or things like we'll talk about later, about suicidality. Sometimes I stray away from telling people that it's a selfish act, right? Or it's a form of manipulation, right? I get, on some level it can be from a perspective, but it's a really real issue, and it's a very serious one. And so you get people who may be thinking about wanting to die or kill themselves, but they're too embarrassed to bring it up because of the belief systems that were communicated to them. And so again, the three biggest barriers are guilt, fear, and shame, as to prevents people from taking action or getting help.
so fear, guilt, shame.
Hmm.
And think about that, right? Fear, like you broke it down very well. Like it can be survival. Like we're afraid to to get help, right? Because we're afraid to admit, right? Again, it comes back to some of that
Hmm.
humility. Like we're afraid to make those changes because we can also be afraid, like, oh well, what if it doesn't work? The other
Hmm.
side is so loud, in our
Hmm.
minds. Like, well, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't help? What if we don't? What if we relapse? And what if we do this? And yada yada yada. Or what if me going to counseling is just a waste of time? What about if I do this? And all the what ifs and
Hmm.
the what abouts and all that. It's just a bunch of BS, right? That's most of the time it's gonna help in some way, shape, or form. It's gonna help. Guilt. I think there can be a lot of guilt surrounding like families, especially when it comes to helping family members get treatment. Everyone wants to, not everyone, but it's very easy to make it about yourself in some way, shape, or form, right? It's very easy for a lot of families to make, especially parents helping their children, or aunts, uncles helping, niece or nephew or someone like that, or vice versa, whatever the situation may be. It's very easy to say, well, I could have done more. I should have done something different. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. You didn't do this. I didn't do that. Blah 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 blah. So it's very easy to feel guilty, very natural. And then shame, you can just feel ashamed. Like you can feel like everyone in your neighborhood, everyone that you know is gonna be watching you as you drive away to go and do that. Everyone knows what you're doing, right? It's just like when you go to the store and or you go and do something and you know you did something, you feel like all the eyes are on you. Everyone's gonna be talking about it. Every single person that's gonna be no, but and you don't want to be that one person in the family that had that had to go to rehab or had to go to treatment or had to go start working on their mental health or for whatever reason kind of thing, family dynamics. And so it's very easy to get wrapped up in that. And it's sad because those are unfortunately not what life is, right? Because these things are needed, right? Mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment, they're needed aspects of our life, right? Because we have to have them because our lives are filled with so much noise and so many factors. And you bring in intergenerational trauma, you bring up generational trauma, you bring in family dynamics, race, gender, all these things that play into both needing mental health treatment or maybe going further into substance abuse treatment or into suicidality as well. These are all factors, right? There's a lot of external factors. There's a lot of things that are in our control. There's a lot of things that are not in our control that could be adding to it. And so the fear, guilt, and shame, they make sense as like the three kind of reasons to not help or to not get involved or to not seek your own treatment. And so if I have a family member, what are just a couple things I can do to kind of work through some of that fear, shame, and guilt?
Well, you definitely mentioned one of them, and one thing that I'm glad you agreed to those as pretty apparent barriers. And one thing I didn't expand upon earlier was the guilt one as well. And so guilt is usually some type of emotion, usually of some type of regret of having done or not done something, and you get a lot of families stuck in that. For example, instances where maybe family member divorced at a very young age, and maybe they had a son that was 5 years old, and it caused a great deal of distress to the point where that son end up developing unhealthy coping mechanisms as a result of that. Or maybe someone brought in a step parent that wasn't the healthiest person in the family. Maybe a person was away for work during much of someone's early years of life, and they felt guilty about that. Or maybe someone was struggling with their own issues, substance abuse issues, and that happens a lot, is a parent or both parents were navigating through their own struggles with substance use disorders or some type of addiction, and they went through a lot of issues, whether it be stress in the family to ranging from foster care, taken away, to getting them back. And and a lot of people will stay stuck in feeling guilt. And when I talk about this disease as this separate entity, and I personify it with personifying me and give it a human-like attribute, it's like this adversary opponent. It thrives especially on guilt, and that guilt can hang over someone's head for a very long time or for the rest of your life. Like, hey, let's say someone was abused in the family from someone within the household. You didn't protect me, and that parent or whoever can harbor a great deal of guilt. And one thing I tell people, the way to inoculate guilt is through the amends process. The amends process means to repair, to make better by taking action. Because if you don't, for example, if someone wasn't sober during your early childhood years, your amends process would be, I'm going to be sober and be healthy. If you weren't present during one of their life, your amends process is to be more mindful and present in their life. Because like I said, you can stay stuck. Then I see it happen all the time. That guilt, along with the fear and shame and everything like that. But guilt is also a very powerful one. So one thing I would tell people out there, back to your question, is you have to be humble enough to say that, hey, I contributed to this in some form or fashion, right? There's a saying, the 3 C's, you didn't cause it, right? You can't cure it, you can't control it. But on some level, especially for a long period of time, you have enabled it or perpetuated this issue for a very long time. And so the first thing that everyone has to do is assume an equal share of responsibility, and they have to work 100% on their equal share, because everyone brings something to the table. You could have, uh, and so that would be my biggest thing, is that you have to work on yourself, because it's an all hands deck approach. You have to bring something to the table to impact and make changes for the overall family system or system. So that would be uh, one of my first things, because it's very hard to help someone if you are clouded and not your healthiest self. So that would be my biggest thing I would tell family members out there, is recognize on your side of the street. Don't keep looking externally on what everyone else is doing or what has someone hasn't or hasn't done, and recognize what my part is, and I need to work diligently and 100% on my part.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I think it's important to, again, it kind of comes back to that humility, right? You have to have some humility to be able to accept what you did wrong, right?
Hmm.
What your part in this was. Because if it, if you're a parent and then let's say it's your child, right? There's some part of this that you have to accept that you did something along the way, not necessarily to cause it, but to contribute, right?
Hmm.
And there could have been contributions along the way. And I think it's very easy to get that confused. Where no, I caused this. No, 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 no. You contributed. You didn't cause it because you didn't force them to make those choices, right? They
Hmm.
caused themselves to make these choices, so they have to accept that part of it. But the things that you contributed, you have to accept them. And then, kind of what you're also breaking down here, what you were saying is like the acceptance and commitment model here, right? Like you have to accept what you did, accept who you were, accept your past for what it was, but you can also commit to do things differently going forward. You can
Hmm.
commit to a different way of life. You can commit to being better. You can commit to being there for your child now. You can commit to all these different things. Being more supportive, being giving them what they need
Yeah.
now. Yes, it may feel like too little, too late, but sometimes that little is all someone needs. And no matter how late it is, you know, if they're in their 30s and you're in your 50s, kind of thing, then uh, there's still a lot of life to live, right? To give them that little bit and to turn that little bit into a medium bit, to turn that into a lot bit, and you still have so much life to live and to repair that relationship and to not to contribute positively to that relationship now versus everyone has to forgive and accept the last 20, 30 years for what they are, and then we're starting today, we're going to commit to being better and doing these things differently going forward. So it's important to remember that.
Yeah.
uh, but you had mentioned a little bit earlier, not too long ago, about suicidality and how you mentioned that, kind of a selfish act. And for me, I agree with that. Sometimes, accidental suicides do happen, overdoses, things like that. It can be used as a manipulation tactic to where people are like, well, I'm just going to kill myself then, right? You see that a lot in relationships, especially in relationships. Well, I'm just going to do it if you don't do this kind of thing. It can be used as a manipulation tactic.
Hmm.
But I want to jump into to some statistics here first and then talk about some of the myths around suicide. So, if you will, I'm going to read off some statistics here. So, I want to start with gender here. Men die by suicide about 3 to 4 times more often than women globally. And then women, however, are reported to have higher rate of suicidal ideation and attempt. So women attempt more, but they're less likely to die. Men die more often. And the biggest reason behind that is because the means of the suicide, right? The means of success. Women are more typically to use less lethal ways to commit suicide to where they know it will more than likely not work. Men, if men are gonna do it, they're gonna do it right, right? They're gonna do it. It's gonna be a one shot, literally a one shot kind of thing. Uh, so that's a gender right there. Then I want to hit age group. So youth, suicide is the second leading cause of death among ages 15 to 24 globally. Second leading cause. Um, this rate has increased in a lot of countries, primarily because of mental health issues, societal pressures, and bullying and cyberbullying. So those something again. Middle-aged men, also the highest suicide rates are frequently seen in middle-aged men ages 45 to 54 in the U.S., with similar trends in other countries, often linked to financial, relational, health stressors. So 45 to 54, kids are starting to get older, kids are starting to move out, everyone's saying, well, we did our 18 together, 18 to life kind of thing. So makes sense. And then elderly people, this is one that I don't feel is talked about enough. I know I wrote several papers on this population specifically in my undergrad. Um, so I know this population, but people age 75 and older, so our older adults, especially men, have one of the highest suicide rates. because of
Mhm.
health concerns, isolation, and loss of a loved one, partner and whatnot. Children's adolescent are another demographic here. 10 to 14 has been rising in a lot of countries. LGBTQ plus youth, also another higher one. Uh, Ethnic disparities in the U.S. Native American and Alaska Native communities have some of the highest suicide rates. Have you ever heard that talked about? Probably not. Dr. Brian, I'm just saying to the listener in general. I know you know
Yeah.
these things, but it's one of those that's not really talked about, especially among their young adults, due to historical trauma, economic hardships, and limited access to mental health care. And then, of course, our African American and Latinx communities are another have historically lower suicide rates than white populations, but have also started to see increases, especially among younger individuals. So let's zoom in here. All of these are coming back to our younger individuals, that 15 to 24 range. What the heck is going on with our youth? What what are the myths and what are the facts here? Dr. Brian, why are our kids struggling so much with suicide?
Yeah, great statistics there, and those are very, very, very accurate. And obviously, it's a pervasive issue, and it's continued to increase. And if I may share, just
Of
for your
course.
audience members as well, is suicidality. There's again a lot of myths about defining certain terms, and that's kind of what I write about. Is there's some terms out there that are well intended, but sometimes we just believe we have the same wavelength on defining terms. Like, for example, I tell people if I'm a group of people of 10 family members and I ask them to define depression, you'll probably get 10 different definitions, maybe similar on some level, but for 10
Mm-hmm.
various definitions. The reason I say that, it's very important to operation define terms without the assumption, right? It's sometimes addiction. You can ask, people to define addiction, and 10 people will define it very differently. And so suicidality is no exception. So suicidality, the broad umbrella of that term, can be on a spectrum. It could range from some people just say, God, it'd be nice if I didn't wake up this morning, or hey, if I, it'd be nice if, I didn't live so long, to obviously making an attempt to the higher spectrum of being successful in attempt and everything in between. And a lot of times people just think, well, you're not suicidal because you don't have a plan in place. You're not going to really do it. And you miss a lot of people. And so, but no matter what, when you're in that spectrum of suicidality, it's to be taken very seriously, because something on some level, because if someone entertains on the one level of suicidality of just repeatedly having these thoughts of not wanting to live, but maybe they now have plan intention, the longer they entertain those ideas, they could gravitate towards having an intention and plan. And of course, on the other end, if someone actually has an intent and plan, we take serious interventions and intervene right away. So I just want to tell your listeners that, is because, like I said, sometimes we have these preconceptions of what suicidality is, and we can intervene sooner than later, or prevent a situation from getting worse, and nipping it in the butt sooner than later. So I just want to communicate that. But
Definitely.
so one of the things too is also that you had mentioned, statistically, we usually think like, oh, suicidality is just for these older people or people who are alcoholics and stuff. And we have this preconceived idea of what suicidality in a person may look like. Well, that person,
Mm-hmm.
they're down and out, they're homeless, they have no family, they're isolated. And no, and you get people who are actively working and present in a different way. You would not think that. I mean, we've seen it happen all the time. You have people of high level of status who are very wealthy, to people who are very successful and thriving in their field of work, or some people that have a lot of family around them, but they don't know the inner storm that's going on within them. And so, suicidality, I believe, is not changed, so to speak, but the way it presents itself has changed over time, at least especially in the work that I do. And definitely the impact is we're seeing younger generations being impacted. And there's a lot of various reasons why. I think there's a lot of cultural aspects that may be contributing to it. Things like bullying. Bullying has reached different levels. Bullying has been around since the beginning of time. But I think with anything, it's changed, right? The advent of the internet and social media has uh, just allowed the ability to bully more pervasive and effective. We can really bully someone from behind a computer. And so it creates this isolation. So that's one way. I think a lot too that with higher technology, social comparison is really difficult now. You know, we have these, and we have this high technology where there's a lot of these editing and everything like that. And so it presents this image and reminder of what I'm not and what I'm supposed to be. So that can have a huge impact on self-worth, self-esteem. And it is, and I'm not saying, with everything, I have this conversation a lot with clients, is that they sort of create this negative label to things like, oh, the internet and social media is all bad. No, social media, I think there's wonderful things about social media. I tell people I haven't stepped a foot in a library in probably 20 years because I can get information at a click of a finger, right? The
Yeah,
way we communicate.
especially now with like AI and stuff, like
Yeah,
you can get literally any information you want in 15 seconds tops,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Anything
Any
that you want to know.
you could book a flight within minutes rather than back in the day you had to, in my days actually, without dating myself too much, but you had to go to a realtor's office, literally walk in and sit down with an agent and book. Like even getting a loan, you had to go to the bank and do that. You can apply for a loan online. And so
Yeah, you
there's
can do everything
with
right at your fingertips now. Kindle, you
yeah.
can read books right
Hmm.
at your fingertips, and every book has an ebook and or an
Hmm.
audiobook, so you don't even have to read it or flip through it. You can just
Hmm.
listen to that thing. And podcasts, if you want to listen to someone specific, you can find a podcast about like someone specific that they've maybe been on, like if they're big enough and things like that. Like, you know, Joe Rogan's podcast with, President Trump last night. We're recording this on the 26th. It came out last night. In the first 12 hours, it got 11 million views.
Wow.
You think the YouTube servers were ready for that? They were trying to be, but the video had to be unlisted and then relisted
Wow.
once, and then it was blowing up. That's not even counting the views on just like Twitter or counting just the views on Spotify, right? So we got probably 40, 50 million views in the first 12 hours. Like that is
Hmm.
unheard of.
Hmm.
I'm like, I want to do a podcast that does that, but no, we can get information at such a rapid rate, right? And when you collide two big forces together, it can blow up, right? And it's really
Hmm.
cool to see. So information is at a premium, which
Yeah.
can also be harmful to our young people, right?
Yeah.
Because then there's so much information, and kids can learn how to use ChatGPT fairly easily, uh,
Hmm.
and ChatGPT doesn't know the user on the other side. I've been using ChatGPT myself for like a couple years, forever, since it was like ChatGPT like 2 or 3. Now it's like 4.0 and 4.0 like premium and things like that. Like it's very much evolved in the time I've been using it, but I can literally ask it like about myself. Like, okay, with all of our interaction, what would you say I'm like? What would you say? And it can tell me about myself, which is really cool. But that can also be really harmful to our youth, to our young, very impressionable mind, who can see this. And all of their apps have an AI feature too. Instagram has an AI feature. Snapchat has an AI feature. Twitter has an AI feature. Facebook has an AI feature. So all of these apps that they're using all have their own, AI, models, which can be really dangerous, but can also be very good at the same time. Because then they can ask questions to these AIs, and it's just about how they learn to use it, right? They have
Yeah.
to learn to use it. With all these tools and whatnot, how can parents or how can loved ones or how can just children or people in this 15 to 24 range, because we do have a really good demographic of that 18 to 24 listening to the podcast. Uh, what kind of things can they do to better support themselves or others around them who are struggling with like these, the suicidal ideation, suicidality?
Yeah. So a big component too, and the one word that first comes to my mind is in a very powerful concept that I learned in one of my continuing educations, and early in my training career, is the concept of validation. Validation to me is I believe, one of the antidotes to miscommunication and one of the barriers to effective conflict resolution. So, validation means to acknowledge someone's truth. You don't have to agree with it, you don't even have to believe it, but to acknowledge someone's truth is a critical component to understanding someone to the point of, I believe it's the major precursor to being empathic. meaning to understand someone's worldview from their lens. And you see that a lot with the disconnect between generations. You might went through it, I went through it, is that there's this generational divide. Well, hey, when I grew up, we did it this way, or your generation is just so much off worse than ours. But every generation, you think about it, they had their own issues and concerns. And what that
Hmm.
creates this bigger barrier. And what I advise a lot of parents is, especially nowadays with the advent of the internet, if someone doesn't feel connected with someone, they don't feel like they're being heard, they have to their fingertips people that will hear them, or they have knowledge out there that will endorse. You can have any, almost any type of belief system, how radical it may be, and you get on the internet and you will find a group or some entity that will endorse or support that ideology, right? Whether it be a political ideology, a religious ideology, some mental health ideology. Just as a side note, speaking of suicidality, what was very concerning is there were sites out there or people putting out there on ways to commit suicide and even
Yeah,
suicidal
there's
pacts.
it's on Reddit. There
Hmm.
are subreddits out there, and Reddit definitely needs to do a better job at some of this stuff. Because I think Reddit's great. Like I use Reddit almost daily, just A for entertainment, B for to find people that I can maybe offer some advice to, things like that. And I also use it for podcasting as well too, to my own benefits. I use it to benefit myself mostly, but there are these subreddits that I've seen, and I'm sure I could search it right now on Google, where I could put in suicide subreddit, and Suicide Watch, 5.16 thousand followers on subreddit
Hmm.
Suicide Watch. And I'm sure there's more out there, right? But there's people out there that are be in these subreddits, um, talking to people who are on the verge of committing suicide, and then encourage it. They'll jump into these and they'll troll because they think they're being funny, or they're kids and they're all together. Like I just pulled this up, right? And this is kind of sick. So I'm gonna, well, not sick in a good way, but I'm gonna share this screen. Hopefully you can see it, Dr. Brian. But maybe, where is, there it goes. This is like the Suicide Watch subreddit here, and they never tell you doctors should be allowed to just help anyone commit suicide if they want. I lost the will to live. There's no justice, and these are all within the last 24 hours. Please, someone help me. My mental health is completely deteriorating. I got sexually assaulted, so being ugly and female. We should get paid to live. Just an hour ago, 5 hours ago. I'm 30 years old. 5 hours ago. Lonely, broken. Um, just had my 30th birthday. I just attempted suicide. Like getting on here and posting about it. Uh, my second post today. I want to end it. Accused of rape. Like whoa. Like it's out there. And like I'm sure like 24 years old, get in that age range, 30 years old, in that age range. Uh, you look at these and there's guilt, there's shame. I'm ugly. I'm not good enough. Uh, I got into a car accident yesterday and wish it was hard enough to just take me out. Like
Yeah.
it's it's disheartening, but
Yeah, for sure. And what I'm seeing with that too, of course, with anything, the silver lining is there's a forum of people who are giving permission to talk about it, and a forum to
mhm,
connect with other people. And maybe there might be someone out there who shares their story that's similar or helps them decide on living. And of course, you're right. There are trolls out there. There are people who will say things because of just a level of uneducation or just fearfulness. From there, just alone from those that you showed me, number one, it shows the pervasiveness and how cultural suicidality is. But from at least the ones you've showed me there, I think that's huge, where there is a forum where people can come and feel less ashamed. Another positive with a computer is you don't have to show up in person to a group in your face if you're dealing with that type of
mhm,
fearfulness and shame, and they can talk about it. And there might be someone on there late at night, 2 in the morning, say, "Hey, hang in there. I was there where you were at." And of course, there's the unhealthiness part of it, and so where people are going to troll and be desensitized or even bully. There's a what I want to tell people out there in regards with suicidality is, at least with the hundreds of people I've worked with, people who had major attempts, and survived. One of the things is most people who want to end their life don't truly want to die. They just want the pain to stop, and that pain can come in the form of emotional or physical pain. And what
Hmm.
I tell people all the time is that pain will subside. It can subside. One of the best sayings I've ever come across. And there's a lot of different sayings, and sometimes some resonate better than others. Like, and to this will pass, or the sun it gets better each day, or the sun will come out tomorrow. Whatever you want to say. But one of the best ones I heard that I stick with, that just is metaphorically resonates with me, is every storm runs out of rain. Every storm runs out of rain. And it's true. No storm can continue to rain. And that means that sooner or later the clouds will part. Does it mean that it's a daily? No, sometimes we can have a season of a storm. Every storm will eventually run out of rain, and we just got to hang in there. And the reason why I say that is I was working with someone before who lost a grandchild. And as a grandparent, she thought it was unfathomable that she would never get away from it. And she struggled for 3 years until finally she's starting to say, wow, I'm starting to laugh again. I'm starting to go out again. I'm starting to connect with other people again. I'm starting to memorialize my grandchild by reflecting on the memories. And so she went through 3 seasons worth, so to speak, of a bad storm. But now her storm is starting to run out of rain. And so no matter what you've been through, and so most people who attempt suicide, there's a perfect storm. Everything's going wrong, a traumatic event, or they're under the influence, something just happened to them, they're disconnected. But as much as people get into that idea of wanting to end their life, they can get back out of it. For example, by asking for help, getting fellowship, if needed, go to the hospital to get stabilized. But most people, there are some people out there who plan it for months, for years, and so forth.
Hmm.
Those are what I call outliers. Outliers are meaning that they're on the very edge of it, in rare cases. But most of the people fall into that bell-shaped curve of that average. And I want to let those people know is you can get out of that window. There's things you can do. That pain doesn't have to last forever if you're willing to make a change.
Yeah, 100%. And it doesn't have to last forever. You just have to, again, you have to find that hope. You have to find that humility. You have to, work through some of that fear, some of that guilt, some of that shame. I saw some of those posts that we just looked at. There was one that mentioned a little bit, I couldn't do it because of my brother. Guilt,
Hmm.
shame. And
Hmm.
those are common emotions across both these things that we're talking about. Between substance abuse and suicidality, they share those 5 things. They share needing hope. They share needing humility. They share the fear, shame, and guilt.
Hmm.
They share
Hmm.
those 5 common elements, and they're
Hmm.
very common across both
Exactly.
fields. So I just wanted to highlight that because to interconnect those. There's a reason we're talking about these things because they connect to each other. But last one here before we jump into some fun questions and kind of take a breather from these topics that we've been talking about for the last
Heavy
40
stuff,
minutes
heavy
or
stuff.
so. So you emphasize spreading mental health awareness through wellness talk and community engagement. What's a couple of those key messages you hope to convey in your talk and you know working to end the stigma around mental health?
Number one, stigma, of course, is a huge one, and I believe, at least in America, and I think globally as well, is we are starting to chip away at stigma. Stigma is this negative label that we give to something, right? And there's a lot of stigma behind mental health, but I think I could speak at least in the U.S. as an American, we are starting to see the chipping away at this stigma, this shame around mental health and substance addiction. And here's another silver lining of the internet is because we have the ability to talk about it. Whenever there is someone of a high profile that mentions and comes out with their struggles with substance addiction, mental health like depression, or they're coming out, in their terms of sexuality, the impact that has for many people out there who are struggling, because what it does is it normalizes, especially with people of high profile. It just happens. We see some celebrity, some actor, some high level athlete, and we think logically we know it, but we think that they are beyond human, right? No way they struggle. They have so much money. They look healthy. They're beautiful. When all this stuff, but when they become very vulnerable and they talk about their own struggles, it really puts us into recognizing that they are human-like and they struggle like us and they could be successful. And so I think, number one, that's a very powerful message. And of course, with the recent passings of Liam Payne and so forth, although very tragic and sad, there are silver linings to it, at least in awareness, right? As we just thought
Hmm.
that, man, he's on the top of the world, has all these fans and impact. But then you were going to learn he had a lot of internal struggles. And so I do believe that the message I would like to tell people out there is that because there's still things you can do. We just have to change our strategies. Families can still come from a loving place, right? You can still love yours, but we have to set healthy boundaries and limits. And healthy
Hmm.
boundaries, limits don't have to be this aggressive thing. You just tell this person that I love and care about you. We love and care about you. It's just that we can't support this unhealthy lifestyle any longer. So you're planting these emotional seeds. So that's my biggest message to the people out there listening, whether it be family members who feel helpless, the loved ones who feel hopeless, is that there's still things you can do. You just have to be willing to change the approach and the strategies that you've been doing.
I love that, man. I think that's so important. You got to be willing to change, right? You got to be willing to change your approach. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over
Hmm.
again, expecting a different result. If it's not working, it's not working. It's time to change. And it's okay to make that change. And it's okay to set
Hmm.
those boundaries. It's okay to set those boundaries and talk to people a little bit less, even if they are, your blood and whatnot. Sometimes, may not be healthy. It may not be beneficial to you. If they're not contributing positively to your life and they're not contributing positively to what you got going on, then maybe it's time to take a break, step back from those people, and
Hmm.
find the people that are going to contribute positively to you, to your
Hmm.
life, and to your family, and to your overall well-being. So, I love that. So we talked about a few topics today, Brian, Dr. Brian. We talked about recovery. We talked about treatment, going into treatment. We talked about suicidality. We talked about some of these mental health awareness and education. Is there anything that you want to add here before we, have a couple fun questions here and then wrap up?
That's shit. I mean, as you go through that, in 45 minutes, we covered some really, really heavy stuff. I mean, a lot of the topics out there that some of them are discussed and some of them aren't. And so I really, really appreciate how we were able to just hit these major topics. And so education is the first line of defense for all of you out there. And so
Absolutely.
educate yourselves. And another silver lining of the internet is there's a lot of information out there. We have to be able to be diligent too of what we sift through. There's some not the best information, but information is out there as a first line defense of anything. So start understanding your loved one. If your loved one struggles with bipolar disorder, find out more about bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, find out more about that. And there's
Hmm.
so much resource out there, enriching resources out there to help support and help you navigate through this very challenging issue.
Yeah, 100%. And I always recommend using, AI to help guide you, to help you start learning this research. It can help you very quickly sift through everything because what AI does, it can sift through everything on the internet in mere seconds and give you 10 articles to learn more about it. If you specifically ask, give me 10 scholar articles about bipolar disorder. It'll give you 10 articles about bipolar disorder that are from academic journals or academic research, things like that. So the more specific you are with AI, the more specific it'll give you answers and whatnot, and it can help you understand these things very quickly. And you can learn these things in a day, literally in a day,
Mhm.
or two, and some reading and some research. So it's really cool. So going into some fun questions here, we hit a lot of heavy topics here. So you compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or BJJ for people who know it as BJJ. What or not what? How has practicing martial art influenced your approach to psychology and to mental health?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for bringing that very important aspect of my life. And for your listeners out there who aren't familiar, Jiu-Jitsu, where it means gentle art, it was originated in Japan and got popularized in Brazil. And so Jiu-Jitsu is a martial art that incorporates judo, wrestling, and grappling, and it's a ground fighting technique that involves leverage, using leverage, and also submission tactics. And it was originally designed for the smaller, less larger person, so to speak, to be able to defend themselves that were smaller and weaker against a bigger and stronger adversary. And it's very effective by using, like I said, leverages and being comfortable with close contact and especially on the ground. Because if you are going to be assaulted, attacked, you will most likely end up on the ground in some capacity. That's why you see a lot of police officers, security personnel engaging in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So for me, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I also, growing up, competed in karate, so I have some exposure to martial arts as well. But Jiu-Jitsu, to me, the reason why it's been so helpful for mental health is because of the metaphors that are related to it. And so the mat, to me, are a microcosm to the real world, is because in Jiu-Jitsu, you are put in very, very difficult, uncomfortable situations where your job is to stay calm and relax and navigate through solutions for very complex problems. And so it's one of the most mindful sports or martial arts I've ever engaged in. Not to say the other ones aren't. You have to be mindful because you might get kicked in the head, you might need it in the appendix or what have you. Especially with close contact, if you let your mind wander and you're not present in the moment, you can get submitted or choked out. Excuse me. So that's how it's been a metaphor each day in life. And one of the biggest things that it does is it really, really increases your threshold of discomfort. I think one of the biggest things why people don't want to make change is because of the level of discomfort. And a lot of discomfort, a lot of times, is mental. It could be physical as well, but a lot of it's mental. We underestimate how much we can accomplish and how much we can navigate through. And by putting yourself through situations of discomfort, our ceiling point, before we tap out, so to speak, greatly heightens the more we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. So that's what it has helped me in mental health, and that's why I convey to clients is you have to be willing to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to come up with new level solutions and take yourself to a next level.
No, I love that. If you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Three people, let me think that through. The first thing I think about are very innovative thinkers, people. I would say someone at a high level, like someone like a Gandhi, someone of that level who was able to navigate through an immense pain and suffering. I mean, you talk about a level of resilience and level of pushing yourself to a threshold. I would say someone to that level. I would say someone with such social impact, such as a John F. Kennedy or a Martin Luther King, someone who had these global visions of change, especially, and the possibility of change, and an immense level of authenticity, honesty, and leadership. Those would be those are the first people that come to my mind. I'm sure there's plenty others alive and not alive that I would love to sit down and talk to, but those are people who I look at as innovative, big change people in our history.
I think for me, if I was to answer that, I think I would go Peter from the Bible.
Hmm.
Peter, I think just with how much he went through and how much he had such an
Hmm.
impact in the New Testament, I think he'd be really cool to be at the dinner table. I think I would love Martin Luther King Jr. I would love Dr. King to be there. I think that would just be another incredible perspective as well. And then, I'm going to take someone that, influenced me that I, love and admired for a long time was Kobe. I think Kobe at that table would also
Hmm.
be really cool to sit
Hmm.
down, chat it up with things like that, and just get his
Yeah.
perspective and just learn more about the Mamba mentality. Athletes talk about it all the time, so there's something there in the Mamba mentality itself that's really, captivating for athletes. That's going to be captivating for athletes for generations to come. That Mamba
Hmm.
mentality. So hopefully we get to learn more about that Mamba mentality and psychology behind it would be really cool. Um, those are my three. So finally, Dr. Brian, what advice would you offer to a young dad? Let's say he's about 18 to 22 years old, who's just starting out on his fatherhood journey. What's one or two pieces of advice that you would offer to him?
I'm thinking of when I was 18 years old, which was a long time ago. And I was thinking of what would I wish I had learned if I had a mentor, which I did,
Mm-hmm.
but if I had a direct mentor, is I would say the biggest thing is know your impact. Knowing your impact means know your value and know your meaning. And meaning, it means your meaning in life is because when you have value and purpose, know your value, know your purpose, then you have meaning. And from there, you can have impact. I believe that if we all recognize that what impact we have and create our best self, right? Not the perfect self, the best self, I believe we can make major changes in this world. There's about 8 billion people in the world, and you just imagine if 1/8 billionth, which represents one person, tries to be their better self each day, the impact that we'll have, because when we work on our better self, we can make people around us better. And that cumulative effect can affect thousands. And that's why I do this, is because if I can affect one person out there and make them think differently about suicidality, make them feel less shameful and ask for help, I know I'm not just helping one person, because in turn, that one person can help maybe another person, and that can balloon up and doors to open. And that's why I appreciate people like yourself as well, who are going out there on Saturday mornings and have kids to care for, but still have time to know your impact. And so that would be my biggest thing, is sometimes at a young age, it's not very clear out there, but keep searching for your truth, your value, your purpose, your meaning, and impact, and every day be intentional about it. That how am I going to be a better person physically, mentally, spiritually today?
Love that. Well, Dr. Brian, thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights with me today, with our listeners, your expertise as well with us today. It's been a really enlightening conversation that I believe is going to help many people, many of our listeners, whoever tunes into this, they're going to get something from it. They're going to learn something. They're going to feel something. And then they're going to be better prepared to navigate the complexities of mental health and supporting their loved ones. For those who want to learn more about Dr. Brian's work, his services, or get a copy of his award-winning book, How to Get Your Loved Ones into Treatment and Safely Back on the Road to Recovery, that'll be included in the description of this episode. And then, Dr. Brian, if people do want to connect with you one-on-one, what's the best place for them to be able to do that?
Well, a great way, and I'm assuming you'll put this in the description below, but my website is a great way to get in touch with me. It's at drbrianlaquanin.com, and there you have a little bit of my services. It gives an excerpt of my book, and then links where you can get my book. And it also has my social media appearances, like this one will be posted on there on various topics there. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Laquanin, at TikTok at Dr. Laquanin, and on YouTube at Dr. Brian Laquanin. So those would be some of the best ways to get in touch with me.
Perfect. Well, of course, we'll link all those as well. And again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for everyone that tuned in and listened for the last hour. Really hope you came out of this, feeling something, feeling motivation to go and act on that hope, to have some more humility, or to, start working through some of that fear, guilt, and shame, whatever it may be. We hope you did that. And I would surely invite you at the end of this to go and take a break, go and drink some cold water, go and take a relaxing shower, go and unwind from this, because this was a heavy one, and whatnot. Take care of yourself a little bit. And until next time, of course, again, keep taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. And remember that it's okay to seek help, and you are not